Hello and good day, everyone. Welcome back to the show. My name is Sean David. Thanks for tuning in. In today's episode, we got a true legend, Frank Dux of Bloodsport. Frank, how you doing?
Doing wonderful, and hello to everyone. Pleasure to be here.
Great to have you on the show, Frank. Now, Frank, obviously, everybody who watched the movie Bloodsport knows that the movie is about the Kumite, this underground fighting tournaments. And I was wondering, when was the first time, if you can recall, when was the first time that you heard that there might be a chance that this would become a motion picture?
Well, the first chance, I did a short film called Firefight with a friend of mine at the time named Sheldon Lettich. Sheldon, in the editing of that film, met who would become the producer of the film, Mark DeSalle. But prior to that time, I had actually written a script after I did an interview with Black Belt Magazine, and I turned it over to a producer by the name of Peter Deal, and who became also my attorney, a gentleman by the name of Mike Frankel. And together they took it to the American film market. I think it was 1982, 81, somewhere in there. They took it to that. And they hung on to it for quite a while. And we almost cut a deal with Vestron Communications. The deal almost, I thought, was going to go through. And it wasn't moving fast enough. And that's when I, like I said, met my friend Mark, Sheldon Lettich. We did this film called Firefight. He met Mark DeSalle during the editing of Firefight. And to, make a long story short, Mark came into my studio and he was intent on doing a film on kickboxing, which he later would do, which became Kickboxer.
Yeah.
But in the course of meeting me, we started talking about my background, the Kumite, and then he latched onto that. He knew of the script. He bought the story rights outright. And if you look at the contracts, it reflects that, even though Sheldon Lynch has been denying that. But it's right there in the first paragraphs of his own contract. He's been kind of representing it as being his creative work, and Bloodsport is not his creative work. It's based story. I never sold the fiction rights, by the way. Due diligence was carried out on it, maybe not by Sheldon because he was taking my word for it as a friend. I don't know. I can't talk to that. But I can tell you, I had to produce a number of documents, and it's in my contract what I had to produce to get the film made. Did it. They were impressed enough that they put credits in the back of the film. Where you look at the film and they mark all the different things that they thought were really important to note in the film. And so that was in the back end credit roll. My world records, being the first to found the first American system in ninjutsu, which made a lot of people crazy because they were saying at that time the only Khabib ninjutsu was authentic and you get, et cetera, et cetera. It was a threat to the kind of whole traditional values idea that you don't need a teacher to become trained. So people who had schools and stuff vested interest in that, saw that as a threat. And it just evolved from that point on, I've had people take a lot of cheap shots at me with sensational journalism saying my instructor didn't exist when they really didn't say that. In fact, the newspapers, that's what people twisted from it. There was an editorial written in the 1988 of the LA Times by a guy who had a vested interest in kind of basically, ruining my life. His tone in the thing is very vicious. He said Senzo Tanaka didn't exist. There's no proof of it. Yet his own paper published a list of all the people who were in Manzanar, and there's his name.
Wow.
Okay. You have, you can go to the National Archives. You can see his name. You can go to Ancestry.com. In fact, Art Voice was the first actual publication to do their own due diligence instead of copying what was said in the LA Times. And you see a number of people, articles written. They said, "Oh, Tanaka didn't exist. There's no proof of the Kumite. All the Black Dragons, any trace only came back to my door." When in fact, anybody had done just remote due diligence, not even think, they would have seen that Tanaka exists. You can go to the registry. He's there. And it's just like I said, people at home can do this on their own. They can go to ancestry.com, type in Senzo Tanaka, and you can see his travel documents, his death certificate, his draft notices. I mean, plenty of evidence to prove that he existed. Okay. You can also, by the way, that he died exactly around the time I said he died. He lived exactly the time I said he lived. He was the age I said he was, so it's not like some coincidence thing. Lived. On top of that, the Census Bureau proves that he lived close to me. So, I mean, that's the other things. And was in the Chicago area to meet the Black Dragons who he was with. And that's how I kind of got the introduction, was through them. But that all happens, again, you have people who want sensationalism. We're now very accustomed to fake news and how people are putting out fake news regularly today on the internet and social media. And that was kind of a rarity back then. So a lot of people kind of accepted that. But that became the newspapers' like top 3 articles. So they weren't about to print a retraction. They had the sensational article, and it was making them millions of dollars in reprints. And that's the unfortunate reality of the situation. I had to live with that stigma. When, like I said, the Black Dragons, you can see articles on them in Black Belt magazine from the 1970s and 60s. And aside from that, you can just look up the history of them. They go all the way back, and it's well noted in Chicago when they had an arrest of one of Tanaka's friends. I forgot the gentleman's name now, but there are pictures of them together. And he was arrested in 1943, as being a Black Dragon for subversion. The Black Dragons, by the way, are responsible for founding and funding the Nation of Islam. So there's the historical realities of that people don't even want to talk about. They did it as a reason. They knew that we were going to war, and they wanted to create enough dissension in the United States so they could exploit racial inequality and keep Americans busy trying to fight a 2-front war, one at home and one abroad. That's why that arrest, so that's a lot of where that comes from. So there's a lot more than meets the eye here. And historically, it's very in-depth and very rich. I kind of sit here and go, I need to get around to writing a book on this and really just... Obviously. But it's the cool part that we can get at least a sneak preview of what has really happened. Now, right. Coming back a little bit to the movie Bloodsport, what I would like to know, since this movie became such a pop culture phenomenon, what were your expectations when the movie was shot? Not when the movie was in the can, but while shooting the movie, what were your expectations? Well, first of all, my expectations were, oh boy, we're in trouble. Because when I got there, they had I had to send for the uniforms. I had to sit down with Mark and say, look, you need uniforms. These aren't correct. And then I got a hold of some guys were martial arts. They were and they brought their own uniforms to the movie. Most of the karate guys did that. The Jean Claude's uniforms in the movie were my own. I had to get them sewed down, actually, so they'd fit them. A belt, etc. And we went from there. So I was involved in the wardrobe. I was involved in set design. I was involved in casting the film with Marilyn Chang. She was an amazing woman. She was, she would tell me stories about Bruce Lee because she'd worked all his films.
Oh, nice.
And she was a wonderful person. I got to meet through her Paulo Tucci. We became slightly friendly at the time, and he showed me all around Hong Kong. I got to meet another guy by the name, we'll just call him for these purposes, Ben. Ben is a major triad guy. He's probably running Hong Kong, or was running Hong Kong until the communists took over. And he also showed me the other side of Hong Kong, the underbelly. Like he took me in the back alleys, and there's one alley, that if you go down, you don't come out of. He was basically telling me, and this is a lot of tourists, they basically disappear in that alley. And that's because there's something goes on in there. I don't know what, but it could be a slave den, it could be who knows what it is. And I had a sneaking suspicion it wasn't because of what was going on. It is that it would be like walking into the mouth of a lion, because that street was, the nickname for the street was Slave Street. And I have a funny feeling they dealt in trafficking, and they probably kidnapped, tourists. And that's, and you'd be walking right into their headquarters. I mean, it'd be that silly. That was the indication that Ben kind of indicated to me. And so, I even shared that.
Some heavy stuff, man.
Yeah, I mean, I even shared that knowledge with Sheldon Lettuce years later when he was doing Double Impact, and then he turns around and twists it and makes it sound like I'm out of my mind and my imagination. It's like, dude, he would say anything and do anything to harm me. It's become very apparent because he's tried to get, in terms of Bloodsport, I had expectations of a sequel to be made. And it obviously didn't happen. What they did is they tried to say, people tried to say that it never happened, and therefore they tried to fictionalize it. And they did Bloodsport 2, 3, and 4 without paying. We went into court. I proved that, yes, it did happen. What they were saying was false. And then when they realized this was going to go nowhere for them, we agreed on a settlement. And all the rights, all my life rights to Bloodsport, I own them. The only thing that they can do is maybe use the title Bloodsport and make a remake, but they got to do it frame by frame. That's it. That's the only rights that exist. So I started doing the actual sequel to Bloodsport if I wanted to do it.
Yeah.
And Jean Claude Van Damme reached out to me a few years ago. About doing it, and I turned it away. And the reason I did is because Lettuce would have been involved, and I won't deal with the guy.
Yeah,
there's some real between the two of us, because, like I said, he tried to cut me out of my own project.
Yeah. Frank, if I may ask, what in the movie was fictional?
Oh, I didn't break. Well, first, let me start with, I didn't break into my instructor's home to get a sword. Okay. And in fact, the fictional parts of Bloodsport, we had to actually enter into addendums in the contract to preserve the fact that the film was based on a true story. So we actually had to have an addendum to that. But I did not break into my instructor's home to get a sword. What other aspects? Didn't sleep with a reporter before a fight. I can tell you that much.
I'm sorry for you, man, because she was hot in the movie.
Well, here's something funny. Life imitates art in this case. Years later, I met my wife, and she's more stunning than Leia Ayres. Of course, I'm prejudiced, but but they look very similar. And she was a journalist. She worked Frankfurt for a number of years. She was actually one of the few people allowed to cover the Keith Raniere case and be in the trial when it was going down, the Nexium scandal, which the HBO series The Vow is on. And in fact, I believe she's going to be featured in the second season of it. So wow. I'm very proud of my work.
Understandably. Another thing that I would really like to know is, how satisfied were you with Jean Claude portraying you?
Very. He worked really hard. We worked together for 3 months prior to the film. He would come in 3 times a week. And we didn't work it from like he's training to learn to fight. I trained him to look like me when I fought. The stance, the deep stance that you see him take, where he's got his this. That was something that's I called multi-defense stance. Okay, when I invented my style, and he used it, and I was kind of like a signature move for me when I used to fight, or I was at the end of a fight, and I'd back off, because the guy was down or whatever. And you have to understand something. The one thing that wasn't real in Bloodsport, also, it's very important, is the way it's portrayed, that it's sort of like the whole fighting in Bloodsport is like single elimination bouts, like you saw in the first UFC. A real kumite, you qualify. So I fought, and I said this in Black Belt magazine, I'd fought 20 matches. And just because you fight 20 matches doesn't mean you fight 20 different people. I want to make that clear too. Okay. But you fought 20 matches per day for 3 days. And then after that, the top 8 guys, sometimes it's only the top 4, and it can be basically square off. And then you go to single elimination to determine who's going to be declared the winner. Okay. And the thing about it is sometimes it doesn't even get to that, because it's really a test of endurance. Kumite is a rite of passage. It's not about putting butts in seats. It's not about, look at me, I'm the grand champion kind of thing, or I'm better than you. It's a learning experience. That's why if you look at Black Belt magazine, 1980, that covered the article, and they hounded me, by the way. I want to make this real clear. I didn't show up there, hey, I won this event, put me in the magazine. No, they found out about it in 1976, and they hounded me for like 3 or 4 years. They finally put a guy in my school, Tim Chapman. Tim came friendly. He won my trust. And I said, okay, Tim, let me ask him and see if we can do this story, if I get permission from the Black Dragons to do this. And it's not that it's so much secret. It's just very private. It belongs to the club members. It's for our training purposes. We didn't want the whole world to know what we're doing or come in and see what we were doing. We wanted to be the best. We wanted to be better than everybody else. Well, you get that by testing your stuff, to pressure test everything. If you don't pressure test your stuff, how do you know it works? And that's what it was about. And in those days, you'd have dojo challenges. I mean, guys would walk into a school and they'd expect you to be able to get back up your stuff. And I've had guys walk in who never saw what it is I do. They're, from the martial art that they did. And they walked in because they wanted to find out, well, what does a guy like this really know? How is he really going to fight me? How did these Kung Fu guys fight? I can see how they're doing in the, by sit, but or karate event, etc. And that happened quite a bit. In fact, I recall as a boy, Bob Osman, who taught Isshinryu karate, he was on Van Nuys Boulevard, and then he had Chuck Norris and Bob Wall. They were on Ventura Boulevard, where the two corners met. Okay, and their schools were within walking distance of each other. And Bob Wall just started talking all sorts of smack, and then he sent a guy to challenge Bob Osman. And I was there as a kid, and Osman walks in. He's got a bag full of groceries, because right behind him was the supermarket where his studio was, and milk. And literally, when the guys, did his stance, they knew who each other were, apparently. He punched the guy in the head here. The guy went down like a ton of bricks, caught his milk, put it in his bag, and walked in the dojo like nothing. And then proceeded to call Wall and the guys at the school and say, issued him a $10,000 challenge. And then the next thing you know, the school was sold, to, I think it was Bernie Kravitz or something like that. Bernie Kravitz.
Crazy.
Right? But that's what it was in those days. It was crazy like that. And Bob Osman was probably, in his lifetime, was probably the strongest martial artist I'd ever met or ever saw. I mean, the guy was he did the a fight in a movie called The Island of Dr. Moreau. And he had dojo a skull, like a helmet, a Viking helmet kind of thing, right? And I guess he played this kind of boar thing or whatever that had it. You could see the tiger's tooth had pierced it and gone through it when he fought this tiger. The tiger went a little wild, and he actually had the strength to maneuver and handle the tiger. You can imagine that. And I was just like, wow.
Unbelievable.
Oh, he was just an incredible martial artist. God rest his. And there were so many greats that were there, in their times.